Alright, well, if you have been following along with my channel, you know that we've been talking about spelling instruction. We have made a case for the need for direct spelling instruction in this video here. And last week we talked about some effective ways to actually ensure that your instruction is working, which I will also link right here. This week we are going to talk about some tangible ways that you can actually put everything that we've been talking about into practice. Well, hi there, I'm Courtney. Welcome to my channel where we discuss educational research one study at a time so that you can incorporate it into your practice. Okay, so today we are talking about spelling again, like I said. This is, I guess, part 3 of our little spelling series, but it's part 2 of our discussion on one of the resources that I found. This video will build on what we've learned last week. So again, the project that we're looking at was a master's capstone project, and it is titled Using Evidence-Based Spelling Instruction to Support Elementary Students a Self-Study. So basically what this researcher did was compile a bunch of research about spelling in a literature review, and then reflect on that information, try to incorporate it into her own practice. So she revamped some of the activities that she was doing in her class and really tried to make her spelling program a bit more robust and in line with the research that she had been learning about, and then reflected on how it worked and what her experience was like doing that. And she provided a lovely detailed account of her thought process behind every decision she made so that we can follow along with her and learn as she learns. So the first thing that the author did to change her practice a little bit was look at what she was already doing and try to make small adjustments where she could. The author was already engaging in writing conferences with her students, and she already had a little conference form that she would fill out every time she met with a student so that they could plan out goals and next steps, and then she had something fantastic to look back on when it came time for assessment. So all she did as her first change was add a spelling section to this writing conference form. The author's work is linked in the description box, so there is an appendices section that you can look at and see the full image if you want to be inspired by it for your own practice. The next thing that the author did was take a look at the students' word workbooks, and she just added a little spelling log, basically a personal word wall for her students in those books. And then anytime a student was really struggling with a word, or she noticed a pattern where a student wasn't picking up on one of the patterns that she had taught in spelling, she would add the word to their little word list, and she would underline the part that the student was struggling with. So if a student forgot the long E on a word, she would add that word into the correct area in the writing log, and then she would underline the long E so that the student remembered that they needed to be adding long E's to make a vowel say its own name. And then the third thing that the author did was implement exit slips on the spelling tests that she was giving out. So after a spelling test that followed an orthographic pattern, like we talked about last week, she would ask the students to come up with their own word that followed the pattern she was trying to get them to incorporate into their own writing. And they would write it in the corner of their spelling test, and then she could really quickly see, did they understand the concept she was teaching, or are they still trying to memorize spelling words? Now, to be clear, the author was not trying to gauge whether or not the changes she made into her practice were effective for students. Because she already did the research, she was confident that these strategies would work, and so she wasn't measuring students' growth or anything like that. She had the research behind her to support her in knowing that growth would occur over time. She was using this as an opportunity to reflect on her own practice and her own journey of implementing these things. And here's a really good thing to remember when you are looking at research. It's important that authors do state their scope. We talked about this in our video about how to tell if research is fake or if it's good research, and one of the key points was that researchers don't make outlandish claims, and they also are very clear on what their scope is. And so I think that the author did a great job, especially since this is a master's capstone project. The ability for her to reflect on her scope and what her goals of the study actually are really well articulated in this study. Okay, so let's go back now and talk about what the researcher noticed in each change that she made within her classroom and how she felt about each change that occurred. With regard to the conference goals sheet, the author noted that it was quite cumbersome to develop this and to start implementing it. It took a lot of work and a lot of mental energy and a lot of time just to add this in and really make that a focus of her work. However, she did see that it made her more confident of a teacher because she was really seeing the spelling that she was teaching pay off in authentic ways while the students did their writing. So it was a lot to implement, but the payoff was really good for her. She also was getting constant feedback on how the students were using spelling in their work, so she could use this data to constantly inform her practice, which is fantastic. Lots of work, but lots of results too. The author then talks about the word logs that she used, and she talks about how she really did hesitate to organize them the way that they were organized because it was alphabetical, and students don't learn spelling in an alphabetical way, but she did need a way to organize the ability to look up words that students may have misspelled. It was beneficial in that it was keeping track of words that students were struggling with, but it didn't give her a quick or very effective way to keep checking on students' progress. It was more just a resource for students to keep as they were going through their spelling work. In terms of the exit slips, the author noted that they did a great job of showing how effective her lesson went and how well she taught an orthographic pattern for her students to learn and to see whether or not they picked up on it. But because it was just a snapshot of what she taught in the lesson, she couldn't really see the lesson being transferred into an authentic way. So they were great at giving a quick snapshot, but they didn't really show how her teaching transferred into the students' actual practice. She also noticed that with the exit slips, so with telling students, okay, come up with a word that makes the vowel long by adding an E at the end, she noticed that some students were copying, and so she wasn't fully sure if what she was seeing was actually what the students knew or what they were getting from their partner beside them. Then the author spends a little bit of time talking about something that I think is so important and often gets overlooked in the research, which is the cost-benefit analysis that every teacher has to run in their head when they're trying to implement something new. Is the amount of time it's going to take to implement this and make the changes into my practice going to actually be worth it in the long run? Or should I just keep doing what I'm doing because it's efficient and we do only have a certain number of minutes in the day? And so what worked for her was making very small changes in areas that were already taking place. She was already doing writing conferences, so she just added a little spelling section. She was already giving weekly spelling tests, and so she just added a little exit slip on the spelling tests. Later in her work, she talks about her plan to revisit what she's done and reflect on it and potentially make more changes based on the research that she gets and based on what she's learning as she goes. And I think that that is so incredibly inspiring because we can do this. We can all look at research, we can all incorporate little bits here and there into our practice, and we can all make small tweaks and adjustments slowly over time. So maybe it starts with just adding a little exit slip to your spelling test, and next thing you know, maybe we're changing the world. Well, if you use any of the strategies that we talked about today, or if you have any of your own strategies that are research-based, would you do us all a favor and leave them in the comments below so that we can build a community where we can share our ideas and learn from one another? Well, thank you so much for joining me this week. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please don't forget to like this video if you learned something new so that it can reach more people. Subscribe if you haven't already, and please consider sharing this video with a colleague that you think might be interested in learning about spelling instruction as well. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next Friday morning for another video. Have a great day. Bye!